Setting the stage, we're one step closer to the Civil War, and the raid on Harper's Ferry is really taking us to secession and the fact that John Brown, which was an abolitionist from the South, he led an raid in Harper's Ferry, Virginia, in order to attack an arsenal there and steal those weapons and actually arm the slaves in the South so they would start a rebellion against those living within the southern states. And eventually, John Brown was caught. He was hanged for treason and murder. A lot of the slaves, though, while this was going on, actually feared joining in with John Brown and his band for fear of the fact that they would be caught and hanged as well. But already we're seeing here the conflict that is arising between the northern and southern states and this very passionate issue of slavery. So that leads us to the election of 1860. And in this election, we have a number of different candidates. Northern Democrats came together and nominated Stephen Douglas as their presidential candidate. Douglas was a supporter of popular sovereignty, right, of allowing all the territories to vote whether or not they wanted to be free or slave states. The Southern Democrats, on the other hand, they nominated John C. Breckinridge, who believed in slavery. We also have a new party at this election, the Constitutional Union Party, which basically their beliefs were strictly formed within the principles of the Constitution. So they believed in compromise and they believed in the unity and strength of the Union at all costs. And they nominated John Bell. And then finally, the Republicans nominated now well known lawyer from Illinois, Abraham Lincoln, who definitely believed in the fact that slavery should be banned from all of these new territories. Now, eventually, Lincoln receives only about 40% of the popular vote, and he did not carry one single southern state. However, he was able to win the election. He swept the North along with California and Oregon, and therefore became the 16th president of the United States. Now, once Lincoln was nominated, right, in the South, there was a lot of protest because of the fact that in the South, not one person had voted for Lincoln. And so South Carolina actually calls a special legislature to decide what they're going to do. Lincoln, throughout his campaign, had promised that he was not intending to abolish slavery, but what he wanted to do was stop its expansion throughout the United States. So, in this emergency legislature, South Carolina debates whether or not they're going to break away from the Union, which eventually they decide in December 20th, 1860, is when South Carolina officially secedes or breaks away from the Union. And later on that spring, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas follow suit, and they break away as well, forming the Confederate States of America, or the Confederacy, and they elect Jefferson Davis as their president. And so now, formally, right, we have this division now in the United States, which is no longer now the United States, because now we have this separate union, and now we have the Confederate States of America. When Lincoln becomes president and this is going on, right, in his inaugural address, he is trying to address this issue not only of slavery, but also this issue of secession and breaking away from the country. And he makes some very important points in his inaugural address. First of all, he definitely makes the point that secession or breaking away is not an acceptable option. The Union was something that was perpetual, which means forever. There's no way of disbanding the Union. And the Confederacy was not a separate country. This was really just a band of rebels. In his address, he also stresses that federal property in the South will remain federal property. So anything within the southern states, even though they have broken away, does not mean that it falls under southern hands. Those things are still considered federal property. Once again, Lincoln stresses the fact that slavery should not be completely abolished, but it should no longer spread anymore throughout the country. War, right, is not a reasonable option. and that the United States should be friends, not enemies. We're one country, and we are meant to stay as one country. And the address was really meant to reassure the Southerners that Lincoln was not going to interfere with slavery where it already existed. Right? His main point was that he didn't want it to spread any further, but he wasn't planning on interfering with the idea of slavery already within the southern states where it was part of the economy. However, South Carolina and the other southern states didn't view it this way, and with their secession, eventually it is going to lead to all out war. And so begins the Civil War here in the United States.